Hello, hello, hello. This is the Duke back again with another commentary. This time I'm going to dig a little deeper and get nosy. Some of you are going to get frustrated like, why am I speaking on this community? Well, I just think, as another black person looking from the outside, living in a Western country, it's a fair point to, point out certain flaws or differences that we notice from a different group, um, from culturally excelling in their own way if there is dysfunction. And in fact, I'm going to have a little debate about this topic with someone from New York on this topic, maybe in a week or two. Um, there is a simping epidemic in the African American community, and it's something that maybe most people don't acknowledge because it's not something you would place with the term simping. The patriarch itself is almost fictional, it doesn't really exist. The family dynamic is the liberal progressive agenda that's been placed on this community for a long time. So I have this, a bunch of images to sort of to give you the optics on what exactly I'm talking about. You know, it's historical, and I think it's something that's only progressed within the last few decades. And it's something that's been brought up a few times but hasn't been directly confronted. This image here, the black woman, you are God, or the black woman is God, or I met God, she was black. I think that's where the root of the problem is. When your ideology is based on the motherhood, the matriarch of your community, that's where things fall. Because maybe unknowingly seeing the issue in a movement for your people. But when it's based on the woman, when it's based on the matriarch of society, then you represent a weaker vessel to lead your people. And that's where things go wrong. I have here Shahrazad Ali, a very prominent figure, speaker for the Black American community. She has been lecturing her people for the last 4, 5 decades. She has been on in the media. She has written a book. She has spoken profoundly about this topic on how every other person in the community has to take accountability. The young man, the old man, the um black men in prison, the black men in universities, the black men in the entertainment industry, the black men in the upper class. They're all being taken account for their flaws and wrongdoings, but the black woman is allowed to sort of pass on this sort of lack of accountability and in a sense um an entitlement in the Western society. Shahrazad Ali has spent her life lecturing and communicating this message to her people, but people do not listen. People still do not contemplate the issue at hand because if you pay attention to the differences within each group, the Black American society, the Black American community versus the Black African or the Black Caribbean community, the culture is very distinct. And the one trend you would notice is that the woman is not put on top in any of these other communities, in the Hispanic community, in the white American community. They do not put their women on the throne or in front of the door. And I mean, we can communicate the understanding that the Black American community weren't able to allow the Black father to run because of systemic oppression, because of essentially putting the women in front of um, the movement in order to protect the man who was being targeted by the um, white supremacist system. And I acknowledge these things. You see, I've read into the history and the suppression of this community. So I completely understand, but now I'm paying more attention to the flaws that is hindering their progression. It's allowing dysfunction to continue. And it's not my words. I'm just echoing what I've listened to from other African Americans who have defined the issues that are going on, like such Shahrazad Ali. But you have a lot of speakers who represent the community and dilute the message by creating the same rhetoric, this hotep rhetoric, along with empowering the community, reminding people that they were powerful, that they can be influential, that the white man is not superior to them in any way, and they can compete. But at the same time, they add the message that the woman is God. That's dangerous. The Hotep is one of the caricatures that allow this message to be spread. The simp, the super simp, the relationship expert play on this trope as well. Like this man, Derek Jackson, already spoke about him. He creates a narrative to woo and soothe his female audience because the viewership brings a lot of traffic. And what do women want to hear? They hear listen to lies and they accept it because of men like this who create that narrative that they can't take accountability for anything they do. Derry Jackson represents one of those who were taught and conditioned to believe that the single mother, the mother of the community, is the solution to all. He might not have seen an example of the patriarch, and so he reiterates the matriarch. That's what he represents. And he's not no different from the more commercialized and visible individuals such as the man like Steve Harvey. Great man who excels in most of Hollywood. He has several shows. He is very appealing to the sort of media and the sort of visual attraction when it comes to TV. He's a great television personality, but the bulk of his work comes from his advice or his relationship expertise. And he wrote this book, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. It's delusional, the 90-day rule. It's delusional. It creates the incentive that the man has no control over the dating market, that we don't set the rules, when in other cultures they do. In other cultures, they set standards. And I'm going to go through bullet point reasons. Maybe some people cannot acknowledge this problem. I met God. She's black. The woman is God. Dangerous. Dangerous rhetoric. It only weakens the community. It only isolates and weakens the community when you put the woman in front. Women do not want to lead the community. Women do not want to have full responsibility over the turmoil and the work that is placed on her. Hard labor, hard work, heavy load is meant for shoulders, not for hips. But for some reason, this community is creating a narrative that places the black woman in the forefront of the battlefield. And they continue to do so and mix the message. When we have a woman like Shahrazad Ali who has spoken against it, these are my bullet point reasons. Lowest demands from your women. Just like what now Kevin Samuels reiterates, there's a standard that your community sets in every culture. A woman's chastity, a woman's, if she's fit, feminine, and friendly, if she all this combination of attributes that a man and a woman should have. Only a man is expected to uphold to it, which is his money, his influence, his power, his usefulness in society. But they're the lowest demands for your women. Black American men popularized the idea that they like bigger women. No, that shouldn't be a thing. You don't like big women. You like hourglass shape. It's something that's only occurred around the 90s and the early 2000s, because back in the 80s and 70s, women were thin in the Black American community. Women that were fit. But I remember one person mentioned that only a poor man likes a fat woman. And I think that's where the issue stands. I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna when we have this debate with the guy who messaged me, we'll discuss this because it's very funny that you have the lowest requirements, placing your women on a pedestal, as I've spoken about, and they continue to do so, arguing with women like women, arguing with them like women. That's the issue. You're placing yourself on their level, screaming, being emotional, unable to control your emotions, placing their topics on your position. You're not meant to be fighting the same fight. You're meant to be grinding. You're meant to be producing. You're meant to be protecting your community. You're not meant to be arguing with your women. If they're making stupid remarks, it's meant to be insignificant. It's the only community where a phrase is like gender war essentially is the Western way of thought, but it's the only community that's accepted the Western way of thought. In the white American community, white European community, they have issues with gender, feminism and gender. But then you notice one thing: the bulk of the community in the white community, once they go home, from work to home, everything's conservative. A white Karen or Becky in the workforce behaves a certain way, but it's completely different when she's in her home with her husband. In the black community in the Western world, that's reverse. It's acceptable for there to be 50-50 contribution. It's acceptable to to talk back to your man and treat her like your wingman. It's the only community that accepts it. No other community does. I'm looking from the outside. Even Africans do not behave or position themselves like this. There's no equal ground. You are meant to lead, and she is meant to support and follow. She becomes, she places herself in a feminine role, and you're not in your full masculine when you play that game. A broken family, a cycle that continues. The baby mama phenomenon, you normalized it. You've normalized it. It's systemic, okay, but you've continued to normalize it in your culture. It's not normal. Kevin Samuels tells black women they are fat, overweight. You need to lose weight. You need to stay fit and feminine. And this man on the right says black women are queens, gods, and spends his career bashing men who date out, who have decided that they can find better somewhere else because of these principles. We're playing a fool's game. But I'm going to rewind it back. I think the rhetoric started from a good place. It did. During the civil rights movement, during the fight against Jim Crow and just American society in general, in order to protect their people, they had to create the narrative in which we're protecting the community, we're protecting our women and our children. As Malcolm X made a statement saying the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. Now, that is a profound quote being used today. And guess what? It doesn't hold truth today. Because it's not true today. It was true then in the 50s and 60s and even 70s. But there were policies that were introduced to benefit the black woman in the way that was necessary to move and move the community out of poverty. Women, widowers, single mothers who weren't supported needed that incentive. Uncle Sam provided that. But overall, it's caused a massive effect on the family dynamic. It's completely impacted how the men and women are in their community. This quote doesn't hold truth anymore, but it's still being used, and it creates a form of entitlement. And now I'm going to spin it back to the celebrity world. You have individuals in the media, in entertainment, in music that essentially are the super simps of the community. They've created the black woman is God, is supreme, ahead of time, but they do not hold truth to their own practices. They don't. These women. It's funny, you know. Nick Cannon married Mariah Carey. You should listen to how he speaks. Drake, his baby mama is of another, culture, but you know how he speaks and how he presents himself. Super simps. It's this community that creates this phenomenon the most. And then you create women like this who reiterate this rhetoric. They create a perception of the black man in a negative light. At the same time, they protect their community. They demonstrate knowledge and understanding of what's affecting, you know, the society in the black lens. But then they also control the narrative of the black man. Oprah, King, what's her name? Gail King, yes, Lonely Love, Amanda Seals. They create your narrative. They control your narrative. They're in the forefront of it. You've allowed it to happen, and it continues over and over again. Man, that's what I have for today. But I could explore this again, maybe even further and deeper, because it's an important message. It's an important point to raise. Thank you for listening. It's your boy, the Duke. I will be back again, hopefully, to debate this conversation with a friend. See ya.